Thanks to all of you. We will get started. Welcome to the Dean Speaker Series. As you know, this is our highest level speaker series. My name is Rich Lyons. I'm Dean of the Business School here at Berkeley Haas. Just, if I may, flag some future talks. Donald Knaus, who is the CEO at Clorox, will be with us in this speaker series. That's coming up soon. Please keep a lookout. That particular talk is October 20, but we have a long sequence of wonderful, wonderful speakers and leaders for this speaker series. As you know, it is a speaker series for leaders to come talk to us, and in particular to talk to us about leadership. And that's why it is structured the way it is. Today, obviously, capacity crowd here. Very, very honored to have John Chambers here to speak to us today from Cisco. He is the CEO of Cisco. Cisco and Haas, and indeed Cisco and all of UC Berkeley, have a long-standing, very deep, very broad relationship. We have some 400 alums just from the Haas School at Cisco. It's a very important relationship for us. A couple of people that were very helpful in bringing John to us. I want to thank Laura Tyson for helping us in that connection. And I also want to thank Sri Desikan for your role in helping us do that. Sri is 2008, I believe, graduate of our evening weekend program, our part-time MBA program, which incidentally is the most selective part-time MBA program in the country. And sorry, I had to do that. I had to do that. Sri, thank you for, thank you. Thank you for your help. This is exactly what the relationships that make up so much of what Haas is, they do for us, and I thank you for that. There are knowledge flows in lots of different directions. There are lots of Cisco executives that are teaching for us, and we get a chance to connect with the firm in executive education. There are many, many elements of this. Let me talk about the speaker himself. Cisco is a technology giant. There are many elements of that go far beyond just what those words can convey. John joined Cisco in 1991. He was a senior vice president of worldwide sales and also operations at that time. He became president and CEO in 1995, 15 years ago, named chairman of the board in 2006. He helped the company grow from $70 million in revenues to some $40 billion today, led the company through dozens of acquisitions, more than 25 companies in the past 3 years alone. He will talk a little bit about that and its role in their strategy and linked to their culture. He has been listed, as you know, in many magazines, Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, in Barron's World's Best CEOs list, Business Week's Top 25 Executives Worldwide. I am listed in none of those publications, just in case you were wondering. He's widely recognized also for his philanthropic leadership, personally, and also, of course, his firm at Cisco. The first ever Clinton Global Citizen Award from former President Clinton, the U.S. State Department's top corporate social responsibility award. That list goes on, and his connection to causes, whether it's Katrina, reconstructing Lebanon, really goes on, and he may touch on that as well. Please be thinking about the questions that you'd like him to answer. Part of this is obviously the engagement of the Q&A, and we will get to that. But it is time now for us to look over to John and kick this off, because it is a very, very exciting day, and we're honored to have you. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I probably will get more out of this session than you will. I'm going to start with saying from the very beginning, if you agree with everything I talk about today, I failed. I want to challenge you in terms of what's possible. I want you to make you think out of the box. I tried to put myself on the other side of this when I was at Indiana University getting my MBA degree. If I were in the audience listening to a business executive, what would really be of value to me or not? So I'm going to talk everything from market transitions to basic mistakes that I think leaders make, including myself, to what are some of the new forms of organization structure for the future, et cetera, and kind of challenge you and hopefully make you a little bit uncomfortable, even our Cisco members of the team. When you think about the next generation organization structure, we call it a dynamic organization structure, but we're really talking about an organization structure that is built on social networkings. The ability to move from command to control, which I clearly love, because when I say turn right, 70,000 people at Cisco turn right. That is really powerful, but it's only powerful if you're focusing on 1 or 2 things per year. when you suddenly start to move into a whole bunch of market adjacencies, do things that no other company's ever done, you can't do it with that structure. And while I'd like to tell you we moved that way because of social networking, the power of YouTube and Twitter, etc., the reason we did it, our old form of structure just would not get the job done on what we wanted to accomplish. I'm going to talk about leadership and how it's changed both at Cisco for myself and for what we're trying to recruit into the company. I'll talk about how culture, much like it is here at the Haas School of Business, is such an important part of people's success or not. And I'm going to talk about innovation. And let's start from the beginning. You have a choice of being one of the leaders at a company. Do you want to be a very innovative company, or do you want to be one that is really good at operational execution? And you're competing against your counterpart who does the opposite. How many of you want to be very innovative? How many want to do operational execution? The first group just lost. Operational execution trumps innovation. All the studies coming out, Jim Collins, from Good to Great, etc., show that. True in our industry as well. And while I did the same thing you did, when he asked me, he said, John, which one wins? And I said, Jim, it's simple. It's operational execution. He said, how did you know? I said, you asked the question. I would have said innovation, but the fact that he asked it indicated the verse. Now, the point that I'm making is you want to catch market transitions. You want to be able to listen, whether it's from your customers or others, and when you see those transitions occurring, connect the dots, and that's what sustainable differentiation is about. So I'll cover a large number of topics. My expectations of leaders, you're going to say, all right, John, I'm crazy enough to come to work for Cisco. How are you going to measure me? I never get hard work confused with results. That includes myself. What's the number one determining factor of how good a leader you're going to be and how successful you're going to be on results?
How successful the people below you are.
Exactly. The quality of your team. So it isn't just successful, but did you really build a really strong team? When you think about how to do that, to be successful, it doesn't matter if you're at a Clorox, a GM, an NTT, it's understanding your industry. Not just understanding finance or marketing or sales or engineering within your industry, but understanding how this industry, what's the key movers and dynamics in it, etc. As you think about that, as a leader, you've got to be very good at communications, right? To outline your vision, talk about where you're going, expectation of your leaders. What is the most important part of communications?
Disseminating your ideas. What else? Being able to communicate your vision.
And the fun that I'm having with it's listening. Because we think as leaders, the most important part of communications, and make no mistake about it, me as well, early in my career, was how well I communicated to you. Get you fired up, get you excited about where we're going. Great leaders listen well. They identify the market transitions. They understand the problems that they might be having with one of their key stars, what's going on in terms of it's got them out of sync, etc. Listening to your customers. I listen to every critical account in the world, everywhere in the world, every night. Because if I listen, they'll tell me both what we're doing right and what we have to do different. Thing that I missed early on, leaders have to drive the culture and walk the talk. And the cultures are different from company to company, business school to business school. But your key is to understand what you are. And within that, you've got to be the example of the culture. Teamwork, to me, is very important. When I was in school, they'd say, look left, look right. And by the way, both those people probably won't make it. That's not the future. If you can't be very collaborative at Cisco, you're gone. And so the ability then also to take these new social networking skills that you all can do in your sleep and say, how do you bring those to the corporation? How do you do true cross-functional collaboration, virtualization of a company? You work in a different company at Cisco. In your first meeting, let's say at 7:30 in the morning on the data center. You go to a different company when you talk to our strategy in Russia at 9. You go to a different company when you talk about where we're going with security. Then you go to a different company in terms of how we respond to the terrible earthquake in Haiti. Then you go to a different company that afternoon when you talk about your individual functions, sales or service, and you know where I'm headed? That is a normal day. You're in 5 or 6 different companies. The ability really to think about that different than you've been able to do, I think, is really going to be the indication of business and the direction. If I ask you what I think your objectives should be at leaders, these are my 4. Set the vision of the strategy for the company. Vision where you want to be 5, 10, 15 years out. what is our differentiated, and the key word here is differentiated strategy. Then how do you develop and recruit the leaders to implement that? When I became CEO, I didn't realize how important culture was to the success of a company or not. It is hugely important. So to set and to be the example of the culture, and then to communicate all the above, a large part is how do you listen to when it gets working or not within it. And so as we go forward, everything we do at Cisco forces the team to say, where do you want to be on this project, this corporate social responsibility area, this segment of the market, service providers or enterprise, this strategy in data centers versus HP or IBM. What's your vision of how this plays out 5 to 10 years from now? Then what is your differentiating strategy 2 to 4 years? And really work hard, because this is where the team struggles the most on what's true differentiation. And only then do we go, what are we going to do this quarter, this year? Took me almost 8 or 9 years to drive that through the organization. I did it at the top, but making it part of our culture was a huge challenge. So when we do this now, if you don't present this slide and the four slides when you present at Cisco, it costs you $100. Not subtle, is it? And it's a reminder, think where you want to be, what your differentiation is before you say, now let's go. Over the last 18 months, we were the one company that called in Davos in January of 2009, when everybody was saying gloom and doom. We said, no, we can feel it coming out of this. And we not only said that, I think we were one of 2 optimists there, and Laura, I couldn't find the other when I was looking for him, or her. But you could feel it turn. Now, it isn't so important to call it. We made the decision it was going to turn. We swung our aircraft carrier into the wind and we launched. We started buying out companies. We started expanding our payroll well before it was obvious to others. 3 months ago, everything was great. Not a cloud in the sky. Well, maybe 4 months ago. And you felt like we're on our way out of this economic slowdown on a global basis. Then, in the last 3 months, you've started to see it soften. Not sure which way to go. How much did our vision and strategy change during these 3 time periods? None. So the key is to really play out the hand, think through where you're going, and don't get confused with short-term execution with the longer-term strategy. Innovation. We always had 1 or 2 hot products, and it's not so much that Cisco's a company I want you to learn about, although I'd love to see you at Cisco. It's one that I want you to use as tangible examples for the principles I'm talking about. Over the last 2 decades, when we grew from 400 people when I joined the company and 70 million in sales to 40 billion, we never had more than maybe 2 really hot products where we were the true clear leaders, and a couple good products, and then the others we just kind of sold and supported through a great sales and service organization. In the last 18 months, we have product leadership in our top 15 product categories, market share leadership, gaining share in most of the categories against a host of competitors. What changed? Innovation and operational execution together. Social networking, how we organized our company. The ability, as you do this, to our peers. Market transitions, what did our peers do? As soon as you get what our peers did that we did differently. If you begin to look at our traditional network competitors, perhaps a Juniper, perhaps a Alcatel-Lucent. You look at our wireless competitors, perhaps a Aruba in wireless. You look at unified communication competitors, perhaps a Microsoft or an Avaya. You begin to look at data center competitors, IBM and an HP. You know where I'm headed? Different ones in each category. We're number 1 in each one. And if they work together, that is sustainable differentiation, especially if you loosely and then physically tightly couple them together. It's catching market transitions and then being able to compete against the startups. These are how our new products are growing, and that is hundreds of % per year. That's as fast as startups grow. So it's being realistic. Your competition usually comes from below, more nimbler companies, and say, how do you not compete against a competitor, but how do you compete getting the market transitions right? We're a router and switch company, right? Innovation. It's all about the ability to take virtually, not just how do you do a classroom virtually around the world, where literally you're able to have 4 or 5 other classrooms in everywhere from India to London to South Africa to Russia, as though you're all in the same group, telepresence, be able to do an acquisition like a Sterant, which when most companies acquire, your key is, are you successful in the acquisition? Did you grow market share? Did you keep the key engineers? Telepresence grew at 50% last quarter. Sterant grew at 40%, and this is off of a $1.5 billion run rate. The ability all of a sudden to be a router and switch player, and you go into managing the electrical grid, nothing more than moving around zeros and ones, except you move around electrical units based upon their cost, their carbon emission capability. Transform how you do addressing the environment in a very unique way. Lower the cost of service providers by 40% because their cost of capital outlay is their peak load capability. Move from being a player that didn't even understand this was important to us to 2 customers in Europe saying, Cisco, pay attention. It isn't about selling routers and switches. This is an instant replay of the internet. 360 protocols, no security. Tailor-made for us. Then what do? Because of the way we now develop our leaders, not to be an expert in engineering or sales or marketing or finance, but to be a general manager who happens to have an expertise at a point in time in one or the other. We took what I view to be one of the best government affairs people in the world, Laura Ipsen, put her over top of all the smart grid initiatives, gave her a blank check to do this. And because she'd worked on these councils and boards for 5 years in different areas for me, she recruited talent like a magnet, took the top person out of Southern Cal Edison on architecture, took the best person out of one of the key consultancies groups. We now are the thought leaders and have won all the early implementations. The ability to take what Apple did with an iPad, a tablet if you will, and literally bring it to business with collaboration through ASEAS. First major one to announce that. Not following what Apple did, we actually started probably a year after they did, but when they announced in the market, it's one designed for business. When you think about our company, you think about its hardware and software, right? It isn't. We don't use merchant silicon. Now, why that's important is, what is your sustainable differentiation? So we devise our own silicon, take Intel's capability, add functionality to it, combine hardware with ASICs, with software, with the network, with the applications. And that's like a Microsoft, a Intel, and Dell. So thinking again, sustainable differentiation, not falling in the trap of the balance on it. ASICs cost an average of $5 to $50 million per ASICs. We have 50 efforts going on. Competitive advantage, tough to keep up with and match. I could go through many of the other areas. There hasn't been a new player in the data center in 2 decades. We announced an architecture with storage and networking and processor power, virtualization capability coming together. We started on it how long ago? Not a year ago or 2, 7 years ago, Skunkworks. We grew from 900 customers 2 quarters ago to 1,700 customers. We might take on the best in the industry in terms of this market. We're already number 3 in server blades. So versus an IBM, HP, a Dell, we moved into 3rd place. It isn't so important what I'm talking about technology-wise. Catch a transition, create an environment of innovation, and then say, how do you execute off of it? Innovation. In high tech, what was it? All internal. Very few high-tech companies have more than 2 number 1 products that are growing in market share and leadership. We have a dozen. But it is about innovation internally, then redefining it on acquisitions. If you're a finance industry player, Nations Bank buying Bank of America, what were you acquiring? And don't kid yourself. When you acquire, understand what you're after. They were buying customers and geography. When we acquire, we pay almost $2 million per acquired employee. What are we acquiring? The employees and next generation products. So as you think about the ability to do acquisitions in an industry where 90% of them fail, it isn't we're smarter than others. We basically devised our key rules that we follow on it in terms of common vision, common culture, and out of the 141 we've done, 70% of ours hit or exceeded what we told our board of directors we would do. Is our key differentiation targeting the accounts? Or is our key differentiation creating an environment where acquisitions are successful in your industry? Same thing with partnerships. Taking a concept where most people didn't think architecturally on technology and saying, here's how you combine it. And then taking that and say, here's how Walmart changes their whole virtual distribution. Your ability to provide a technology architecture and a business architecture when none of your peers do any of the above. And only in the last year and a half have you started to see our competitors start to do technology architectures to compete. So as you think about what you're doing, it isn't the technology industry I'm talking about. It's the ability to see transitions occurring, either by the quality of the team that you add, or your ability to listen to key customers and connect the dots, much like Thomas Friedman does, the writer for the New York Times, and ability to capture a couple data points and then skip ahead 5 and 10 years and the implications of those. Cisco probably does 3 or 4 things really world class. We do a lot of mistakes. But what we do very well, we don't focus on competition at all. I'm from West Virginia. If you're driving the mountain roads in West Virginia, looking out your rearview mirror, you're off the road over the cliff. So when you think about setting your strategy off your competitors, at a minimum, you're 2 years behind. At a minimum. So I think you try to get market transitions right. They can be economic, as we alluded to earlier, move when others don't move. They could be data, voice, video coming together over a single network, which we said this would happen in 1997. No one in the industry thought it would. It could be explaining to service providers where they get 90% of their revenue, voice was going to disappear and commoditize. And then I made the mistake of saying it's going to be free. But getting the message across in a way that people grasp it is key. Every industry that you go into is under tremendous stress at the present time. When industries and companies are under stress, what do? Time for innovation, time to really form different relationships. If the least stressed are service providers, which with regulation going on in the US, you may have trouble hiring people or building out broadband the way it's currently headed, or utilities that are going to move electricity around in a whole new format with players coming in that haven't done it before, and governments, all of whom are having trouble with funds. If those are the safest, least stressed, you can imagine where the music industry is, where they lost control of their primary advantage, their content capability, lost control of who their customers are, gave up their profits to service providers, Apple, et cetera, and others. You suddenly see in industries that are willing to change in ways that have not done before. So given what our culture is at Cisco, what do? We moved on all of them with a business architecture. We are probably the best partner in the music industry about how do you change, not how do you split $1 differently, but how do you take $1 and make it 3? How do you reconnect with your end users? How do you do this architecturally within it? Redoing almost all the stadiums in the world about what is the fan experience like there, not just the Dallas Cowboys or the Yankees, but the ability to think out of box, and actually it's the Oakland A's we work with the most. But all of a sudden changing the discretionary spend per fan attending by a minimum of 40 to 50% each event, and then eventually to bring that to the home. Point that I'm making, catch market transitions, understand sustainable differentiation, and it takes us almost a minimum of 5 years before it's material to us. $1 billion is material for me. So from the idea we start on it, our data center strategy with servers and storage and the network playing uniquely together, till it became $1 billion, 5 years. That's about as fast as we could do it in an area. Combining, how do you sell technology, which I get excited when I talk about routers and switches and zeros and ones, but not many of our customers do. And how do you make that really appropriate when you talk to a government leader? How do you sit across Medvedev in Russia? Series of 7 meetings. How do you transform a country from an energy requirement, only one core key industry, to bring innovation to a great set of education, great engineers, but often innovation lacking, and change and transform a country? And who does he ask to take the lead on that? Cisco. Now you say, John, why are you doing that? Part of it's corporate social responsibility, wanting to change the world. That's what Silicon Valley does, and that we really believe we can, rightly or wrongly. Part of it is we found that corporate social responsibility isn't just the right thing to do. I've always believed, my parents were doctors. Those who are most successful owe the highest obligation to give back. But it's also just good for business. King Abdullah of Jordan, Queen Rania, 2 of the most enlightened minds in the whole Arab world, said several years ago, like 9, John, if you help us in Jordan, you'll make a lot of money in Jordan. I said, Your Majesty, I will never make money in Jordan, and probably not in the entire Middle East. Lesson 101 about business, don't make definitive statements. You're usually already in trouble. 70 million in sales at that time. Company was a sales rate of about 20 billion. Today, the company's at 40 billion. We've doubled. 70 million in sales in the Middle East, $1 billion today. More profit than China or India. Catching market transitions. Government leaders saying, if we don't create a middle class, we're not going to have political stability. You have to do that around education. The network is the fabric to do that. Having the courage to think about it, business architecture down, government architecture down, that just happens to be fulfilled by technology. Think of it like a multiple gear bike. Most of the people in this room don't even remember 2 gears on a bike. That was a dramatic change versus 1. But you can imagine if you're in a race and your competitors have 2 gears and you have 10. What we're building is a company that has 50 gears, where at first they work lightly together and then very tight. It's the only way I beat my competitors from Asia, because they'll operate at about 1/3 the cost of labor that we do. Ability to innovate with tremendous speed. Core areas like video, they're going to explode. Core areas like collaboration, which will drive, in my opinion, a 7 to 10 year run in productivity. Not at 1 to 2% like the top economists would tell you from around the world, and like Laura would say, that's what the average is. But much like what we saw from 97 to 2004 with the first phase of the internet, where productivity grew from 1.5% to hit a peak of 5% in 2004. The ability to say, how do you really enable this type of power into your organization? How do you think out of box on how to describe it? Catch a transition. Video is the next voice. Simple concept. But design your whole company around getting that transition right. And risk, and if it hadn't worked, we just moved on to the next one. But video will be the next voice. Video is the way that you communicate in life. Voice is just the way you search off of it, begin to push it to common communities of interest. Voice will be less than 2% of the network loads in the future. Video will be 90 to 95. Catching a transition, understanding how it applies to your business or to your process of leadership. And being able to capture these from the simple concept of describing the way we used to run Cisco was candidly a leader or our top 5 to 10 people in the company playing out the multiple dimension chess game. Moving to the ability to visualize that as a company, practice from 2001 to 2005. Then in 2005, we said we're going to cross the chasm, and I'll come back to that definition in a moment. We're going to put the power of the whole company behind it. And a simple graph that says now it's going to be any 2 of you on any topic that I select. I want you to be able to put together a team representing every single function in Cisco, where that person can speak for the whole team. Process, discipline. And instead of working this issue through where we'll develop it over the next 6 to 12 months, think about taking it to the board of directors in 18 months. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to present me the plan, your team organized. You're going to be in front of the board in 6 weeks. We do that in our sleep now. That used to take us 18 months. We're a company that's designed around speed, then scale, then flexibility, because some work and some don't, and then cookie cut it, replicate. The ability to capture it in simple concepts and drive it across the board. The ability to play out this hand at first with just the very top, and then in every single dynamic network organization you work in, ranging from data center to focus on Mexico, to corporate social responsibility for the earthquake in China. Playing out the hand as though the leaders would. Again, 2005 charts, capturing the concepts here and the direction. Then beginning to say for every single function in Cisco and every single one of these market adjacencies, we complete a very complex vision, 5, 10 years out, differentiate strategy 2 to 4 years, then execution 1 year. Then you begin to balance these across the group so you get your gears of your bike working together. Speed is unbelievable. Productivity increased last quarter 22%, revenue per employee. Quarter before that, 20%. That's too fast. I need to add people at a faster head count. But it is these whole organization structures. What was the Industrial Revolution? Simple concept, wasn't it? Instead of the workers physically going to where the work is and then working on a car and then go to the next car, you bring the car to the workers down an assembly line. What are we doing? we're virtualizing that. The work can be in India or Azerbaijan. We take our best experts from all over the world by functions in these individual dynamic network organizations, social communities, if you will, focus on the work, resolve it, then go on 1 hour later to do the next area, may or may not be related at all. Speed of change. Balancing, and we budget now by projects across the company as opposed to functions. And we used to, you can say, well, John, are you a product organization or a geographic organization or a customer segment focused on service providers or consumer or enterprise? Or are you a horizontal application area? We do each one differently in every meeting. Now, you know where I'm headed. You all are very progressive in terms of what you learn in MBA school here, ahead of your peers. But this is what I'm looking for in terms of my graduates, as opposed to saying, how do we spend 4 or 5 years you learning this technique, is you come out, you actually challenge my teams on how to do it better. Discipline. You know, one of the cool things about social networking is you plant 1,000 seeds. My view about planting 1,000 seeds, you get a weed field. You've got to design architecturally where you want to end up. They've got to play together. You've got to have a common process, because when you do new innovative ideas as a whole bunch of startups or as a company, what trips you in phase 1 is identical within it. What trips you in phase 2, and by 1, it's like a small startup, perhaps as few as 5 or as many as 20 people, usually less than 5 customers. It's purely innovation, a chance to be $1 billion market. Do we have sustainable differentiation? If it moves to phase 2, a couple dozen customers, product's pretty solid. In phase 2, do we say, is it a higher probability of becoming $1 billion? Can we hit our 40% market share minimum goal? And only then do we make a decision to cross the chasm and go for it all. Phase 3, Main Street, it goes to $1 billion. Phase 4, from $1 billion to $4 to $5 billion. But what you do in each category has the same opportunities and the same mistakes, and then you begin to see these extra gears kick in. And I just use gears because it appeals to me, but you guess the concepts of groups working together that originally didn't even speak the same language, literally and virtually, and all of a sudden working together in groups with speed that gets very exciting. Culture, I didn't understand when I first became CEO how important it was. It isn't as right or wrong culture, but every great company has an unbelievably strong culture, usually driven from the top leaders down. We're unique in terms of how we approach it. We are driven entirely by our customers. Customers will tell us what we need to do in plenty of time to adjust to it. We're also old-fashioned. We're a family. I know every illness of every employee, their spouse, or their children that is life-threatening. That's an expanded community of 250,000 people. We're there for everyone in that scenario. Hard to do, but it builds an unbelievably deep and strong culture. Catch market transitions, don't fall in love with the technology, etc. And so as you begin to look at where we're going, we're saying, how do we combine all the above? I got it. Slides are off by a little bit. You go ahead and fix it. I'll distract them. You don't see this. This is technique 101. What I do is come up here and talk to somebody, and I maintain eye contact, because the minute I zero in on your eyes, the whole room's going to watch what I'm about to say to you. And I have no idea yet what I'm going to say, but I'm going to have it in just a second. So your technique is, when something goes out of kilter, leaders become what? Calm. The calmer I am, usually the worse things are. And so even during a small presentation, very calm, walk over here, begin to talk about where we're going. And have you got the message on innovation? Got it. What do you think the 2 mistakes are that I've made as a leader in innovation? Impossible question to answer, but you'll take a crack at it.
Oh, man. Gotta make sure that you're listening to your customers right now.
It's very important, but that one I won't make the mistake. I made that mistake at IBM and Wang. Wang didn't listen to our customers. A mini computer company, #1 in the world, have all the office automation organizations in the world. We went from 37,000 people to 0 because we didn't listen to our customers. Smartest CEO I've ever met in my life. Dr. Ann Wang invented magnetic core memory walking across the Harvard quad. So I'm not going to make that mistake. You know my mistakes? We moved pretty fast at Cisco, right? All my mistakes have been when I moved too slow. Or move fast without a replicatable process behind me. Now, as you notice, I turn as though there's never been an issue, go right back to the presentation, and of course it's fixed by that time, most of the time. But it is catching market transitions, either on a grand scale or otherwise. We will build a dynamic network organization. You can call it whatever it is, but it really is constantly. Dynamic is the key word, constantly changing. Network, because we communicate visual-wise, usually across these groups, have as many as 20,000 salespeople attending a sales meeting, which used to be in Las Vegas with 20,000 people in a single room. We now have them in 120 different locations. Took the cost from 75 million to 23 million. We still use Josh Stone, she's a tremendous entertainer, Steve Martin to really capture it. But the ability to do this in a number of different locations, virtually, fundamental change, speed of education, etc. Catching the transitions in terms of technology is actually the easy part. It's the Web 2.0 activity. It's how do you build a replicatable process? Our terms of a VSE, vision, strategy, execution, our terms of crossing the chasm each stage, what occurs successfully in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then oddly enough a culture that people understand, and then can you build it to where you make the right decision right for the company or for the organization, not for yourself or your own group. Very similar, isn't it, in many ways to what you're talking about here at Haas, in terms of where you go, in terms of what's the ultimate destination, how do your goals and enable the strategic focus, the purpose and the destination, when in fact, probably Rich and the team set it reverse. They set the strategy top down. Ability to have a strong culture. It's on every Cisco belt. Why is it on every belt? Because we can't remember it. Honest answer. And if culture is such a huge part of who you are, you want people to be able to look and say, I get it, customer success. You make the decisions at Cisco on this badge, you're going to be right. What would you say? 95% of the time. And when in doubt, ask one of your leaders. But key elements of that, we focus entirely on the customer. It doesn't mean that's how Microsoft does it or Intel. I'd argue the reverse. I think they are very good at saying what might the technology be out 5 or 10 years. We listen to customers. What are you trying to do business-wise? How do we do it differently? The ability to combine innovation off of market transitions with operational excellence. So a little bit on where we're going, and then how do you do innovation? We talked about it on one side. Tremendous movement in new product areas, new business models, new organization structures as we go forward, combined with a lot of operational excellence, a lot of detail. By the way, all this operational excellence enabled by technology. Really disciplined on it in terms of the direction. So that's where we're going in a period of a very short time period, and I'm going to open up for questions. Anything's fine. How many of you agree with everything I said? Right answer. You don't want to raise your hand here because that's when I come right after you. So who's got the first question?
Please use the microphone.
Okay. And the reason they want you to use a microphone is so they can capture it on tape. But if you haven't got a microphone near you, go ahead and say your question. I'll feed it into the system.
So you mentioned kind of being 2 years ahead of competition and where they're going.
That's all I need. 2 years lead and we got them. We get a 4 or 5 year lead, it's really hard to catch us.
Sure. I'd say the Flip acquisition, a lot of people the commentary on that might have been that you guys were a little bit behind the kind of handheld video versus smartphone kind of use of the video technology. Could you talk a little more about that kind of acquisition, how that fits into what you've talked about, how you guys are trying to achieve innovation and operational execution?
Yeah, good question. We were an enterprise company who built routers 17 years ago. We acquired 3 switch companies and we became a router and switch company. By the way, with 75% market share today of a $15 billion market, pretty good. The ability to think about where you go from there to small business and then eventually the consumer. Consumer's an entirely different animal, a different way of making decisions, different distributions. It's hard to listen to the consumer for the next technology. So you had to say, what is your sustainable differentiation? For us, it is the ability to tie these pieces together with a common video architecture, a common service architecture, common open standards where you can combine the information. For those of you who keep many videos, how many of you have more than 200 or 300 videos on your system? Searching to it is a bear. You can't say, in this comment, this lecture, if you're taking a lecture, which I'm sure you all are in this room with your flips, or talking about friends ziplining through Costa Rica with my wife on my birthday. That was really cool. But the ability to find out which video was it where she looked up and made a very unique comment to me, and find that I can't find, because we have 15 videos that were done on that one run of a trip. The point that I'm making is we didn't acquire Flip to compete with a smartphone. We acquired Flip as part of a vertical application area for video, to where we were already the #1 TV set-top box in your home. You probably don't know it, but it's just Cisco and Motorola that the cable companies provide to you. We were already the #1 wireless part with the Linksys acquisition. So video is the differentiation. It's how you go into it. And for those of you who Flip, it isn't the ability to capture it on a device. It's the ability to have video as a service, be able to email it anywhere around the world, store it, be able to print pictures off of it. So it's our video play in the home. You add to it sports and entertainment. You add the music industry. You begin to add the valet, easier to use, and we'll see if we can become one of the top players in consumer. It's harder than we thought, but reasonably good progress. Next question, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about the first thing you mentioned, which was that operational excellence a lot of times is more important than innovation for success. A lot of times, though, the top talent in the industry, or a lot of people want to be a part of companies that are actually, focused on innovation, especially engineers. So
Yes.
How do you actually sell that to the top talent you're trying to get to come to the company?
I probably don't sell it that way. Okay. One of the first things you learn about a customer is what? What they want to buy and why. And if you listen to the customer, they'll tell you what you want. So if I'm talking to recruiting a COO, I sell that. If I'm talking about the company, reminding them as they do this tremendous creativity once you're already part of the company, I say it's got to be the and, not the or, and the companies who win are the masters of the and. And I remind it requires process. If I'm recruiting a new engineer, I'll talk about CS, I'll talk about Valet, I'll talk about the ASICs architecture that we do that is superior to anyone. I mean, our ASICs is more complex than Intel's or IBM's. And so you talk about what appeals to a person, share with them the culture, make sure they buy into the culture, and then over time, we all move from, I just love finance, I love being able to understand the modeling, et cetera, or I love business development, or I love marketing, but the ability then to make us generous across it. But I usually appeal, if I'm recruiting engineers, innovation, hot place to work. By the way, a great place to work. Top 10 in the world, everywhere, almost any survey, any country. Yes? Go ahead, it's on. It just takes them a minute to catch up to you.
Yeah, just I want to ask a question about your relationship with partners/competitors.
Yes.
Like, for instance, I know you partnered before with Microsoft, and
Yes.
then later on it's a competition on the unified communication
Yes.
scenario. Also, HP used to use their servers. It's right now competition. So how do you manage this complex environment? Like, every day you have competition/partner at the same time.
So many people do partnering as a way of controlling your competitor or peer, or being able to work loosely. You buy a lot of stuff from me, I buy a lot of stuff from you. Partnering is harder than acquisitions, and acquisitions have a huge failure rate. So I partner for life in terms of our ability to work together. But if suddenly our corporate visions of where the market's going to go and the role that each one of us wants to play in that overlap too much, then a partnership comes apart. But most of the partners that we had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are very great partners today. We deliver probably 90% of our business to enterprise, which is our largest segment, through partners. Some will evolve in and out. Some like EMC, VMware, have been partners all the way through. HP, we shared with HP and IBM where we were going to go. And then I think it frightened them a little bit what we were trying to accomplish and why. And so our view is we'd much rather partner, the customers want that, with Microsoft as well. Most of them want us to interoperate, which Steve Ballmer and I have agreed to do within that. But we'll compete very aggressively on unified communications, and we'll perhaps partner in some of the others. I think it's more of a product of a consolidation in the industry where many people are going to do what we did, which is come with a technology architecture as opposed to individual products. That goes back, catch industry transitions. You can argue is it good or bad for your company, but the transitions wait for no one, whether they're economic, industry consolidation, et cetera, then you got to adjust. Other questions? Please.
In terms of your calendar for meetings, what are your typical priorities?
You know, it's interesting. This is why it's always important to track what you say versus what you do. Leslie runs my communication side of the house. My priorities are what you saw there in terms of the 4 things that I do. Vision and strategy of the company, recruit and develop the leaders, a focus on the culture, and then communicate it above. And remember, within the transitions, customer-driven. So my priorities are 50% of my time with customers. My priorities are how do I develop and recruit the leadership team? How do you drive the culture? And there are elements where you're at very high levels, others like calling up when one of our employees lost a son this last weekend, and to call up a father who's been through that and to be there for him in a unique way and then say, what do you need? How do we help? So my priorities are in those 4 large categories. Now, what is interesting, and it'd be interesting if you tracked your time the same way, is if I said, here's how I would like to spend my time during the course of a year, and then to measure every quarter how you actually did it or not. It's actually very healthy because it calls me to realign some of my resources. I tend to overcommit. It's a weakness for me. Oh, yes, we do. And sometimes it's embarrassing you weren't as close to your objectives as you thought. That's actually pretty healthy to learn. Please. Can you catch it?
When you have the vision to see the market transitions or the intersections in the future, I'm wondering how you decide when you're going to act on them, the timing, especially when your technology a lot of times is what's going to help drive those market transitions.
So what is interesting is if you're looking for a technology to catch a transition and it's a meaningful material transition, you've got to bet 5 years ahead of time. So you can only do that a certain number of times and be right. I'd call those early skunk works, etc. And then you've got to be realistic. Do those phase 1 skunk works go to phase 2, and then do you catch the transition and move across the chasm using my vocabulary? If you're not 5 years ahead or 3 years ahead, but the market's taking off, you can never do what IBM used to try to do. I'll be late to market, or GM used to try to do. I'll be late to market, come in, and I'll find a way to become number 1. That almost never happens. So we go acquire one of the top 5 companies. Or if the 3 to 5 leaders are really big, then I partner. Because big acquisitions in our industry, acquisitions of equals, has never won in high tech. So if it's never won and you're not smarter than your competition and you're pretty good at acquisitions, then you don't do it on the approach. So partner or acquire if I'm late to it. What else? Please.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the years preceding your executive career? How did you get to decide where you wanted to go? Did you just wake up one day and said, you know, I want to be a CEO of a global company? Or did it take being 2 years in advance of everyone else on a personal level, so to speak?
Okay. Now, you've hit 2 or 3 important elements. I went to school for 9.5 years. First, I loved to play basketball. It was my secondary occupation. I wasn't very good at it, but I loved doing it. And so I went to Duke, West Virginia, and Indiana. After I was about to graduate from Indiana, I had my offers out of New York and Chicago, you know, in the big firms, acquisitions, combine the combinations. And one of my buddies called me up and said, John, I want you to interview at IBM. I realize you will never come to work here, but it would help me on my career if I could attract in some talent for the interviews. And once you're in, for the interviews, then I've done my job and I know you won't come to work here. And I said, Steve, you know, I really care for you, buddy, and we played a lot of basketball and did some good school work together, but I'm not coming. He said, I got 2 tickets to the basketball game. I said, I'm there. And 2 weeks later, I'm working at IBM. The point that I'm making isn't the funniness of it. It is the ability to realize that if your education is right, it gives you a tremendous capability to move within an industry and otherwise. And you want to keep open to what's possible. At Wang Laboratories, it was probably one of the greatest successes of all time. As I said earlier, Dr. Wang, brilliant. He led us through 32 years of unbelievable growth and never missing. Smartest man I ever met in my life, but it was a one-person company. He made all the decisions. And we missed going from mini computers to a PC and from mini computers, which were really driven by software, to a software company, because he built the first PC 10 years ahead of the industry. And he said, it's not going to sell. And so at that time, I learned to keep an open mind on technology as opposed to fall in love with it. And that has had a huge impact on it. The third element may surprise you. When I left Wang Laboratories, I grew through the growth, and for 5 out of the 6 holidays out of a 1.5-year time period, every holiday, I had to plan for our next layoff. It was brutal. And we eventually went from, as I said, 37,000 people to 0. I couldn't ask my team to follow me after we reorganized if I was out looking for a job. So I finally lost faith in the new leader of the company, set it up respectfully so it transitioned, and then I went out and sent out my resumes and waited for the job offer to come in. And waited, and waited, and waited. And the first 2 months were unbelievably humbling. But in the next 22 months, I came down to probably what would have evolved into, in the next 2 months, I came down to probably 22 offers. Guess how many offers I got on my own? By reaching out, here's my background, responding to a career opening. 1. The other 21, I got through friends. Because how I treated them early in life, they said you'd fit into my company well, or here's an opportunity. Ended up at Cisco, pure luck. I had 3 offers here in the Valley, one for the 1 position, 2 others for the number 2, big companies here. And the same search firm had the searches in those 2 plus Cisco. So they shouldn't have presented me the second one, and they weren't about to present me the third one. The Valley's so small in terms of networking that the people called up an ex-Wang person on all 3 job opportunities. The first 2, they said, he gave you a great review. The third one, halfway through the review, he said, John isn't that good, and hung up on him. And he called my wife. I got back from a long trip looking for a job, and Elaine said, I've got your job. It was because of how I treated that person 15 years before when he had a problem that wasn't of his own making. I treated him differently. And he said, this is where you belong at Cisco. And that's probably a good one to end on, unless there are other questions you want to cover. It speaks to the relationships you develop in business school, the relationships you develop in your personal life and at your businesses. And usually how you treat people determines not only the culture and the type of person you are, but also how they treat you later. And you might say, John, you're the product, or other leaders are the product of your successes in life. I actually think what determines who you are as a leader is what? How you handle the setbacks. That's much more important than really what was ingrained to me, even though it was remarkably painful. So Rich, with that, let me turn it back over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I probably want to say something. I'll need to comment first.
A lot of content there. We want to thank Cisco. We want to thank all the support. We want to thank John Chambers. Thank you very, very much. And thanks to you for coming.